Good morning, everyone. Kris here with Inspired Energy, and joining me this fine Wednesday morning, Hartwell. Good morning, Hartwell.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, so we're continuing this journey on the variables, the four transformations, which I'm finding intriguing. I think it lends a whole new light onto human design, and so just knowing the gates and channels, it like really is another level on the proverbial onion, as you call it, that you peel back the layers. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure it is,
yeah.
and I think it really speaks to our experience of life.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, not just the what happens, but the how. And
Hmm.
so, today we have looked at determination, which is all around dietary things. We've looked at environment. And when we set those things up, then we are prepared potentially to see the world in as we were meant to see it, which is
Hmm.
perspective.
Hmm.
So there's a built-in perspective that we are all meant to see the world, a perspective that is ours specifically,
Hmm.
rather than a homogenized perspective.
Yeah. Well, I just find it so cool. We like playing the game about. Well, I like playing it. I don't know if you do, but I like playing the guessing game. And once you start learning all of these things, oh, I wonder if that person is this, and I wonder if that
Hmm.
person is that. So, I mean, it's kind of a tool for using in dealing with people, and how well you know them, right? Yeah,
Yes. And
exactly.
I mean, the test of any kind of system is does it have predictive value?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, I think often it's like you guess as something and it's like, oh, that's right, and it's like, oh, okay, this system is working.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, let's dive in. What can you tell us about perspective? Like, what is it?
Well, one thing I want to bring up before we dive into that is the story that Ra told. He told a couple of stories. He was a big storyteller, the founder of human design. And he says, imagine you're an alien who has one weakness. There's one thing you lack, which is awareness. And you want to have that experience. So they embed themselves within humans to experience a consciousness in a form. And that's us, he says. We're the aliens watching from within the form. Because remember, we've spoken about this many times before. In his metaphor of there being a vehicle, a passenger, and a driver,
Mm-hmm.
we are the passenger in that metaphor. And
Right.
so, as the passenger, we're meant to be letting the vehicle do its job.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of an off-color story he told, but he told this about himself. And he says, in my lifetime, I've done a lot of drugs. And he says, there have been times when I've been on LSD and I was driving home, and it's like I got home, and it's like you would think, well, that's not a good thing. And people, I am not encouraging people to drive under the influence, by the way. But he says the vehicle knows its way, is why he brought up that metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are, this awareness embedded within the form. And the moment that as we begin to understand that we're the passenger having this experience, then we can let go and we can also embrace our own unique perspective. So, perspective is basically the way we frame our world.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
And yeah, and like everything else, the world encourages us or favors, conditions us to look at the world in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we do not serve ourselves or serve the world by giving up our own unique perspective. So basically, perspective is how do you see the world, and what is the right way for you to be seeing the world?
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. So, what are the different perspectives? Like, what are the different ways that we can view life or that we're designed to view it?
Well, as in all of our human design teachings, there are 6 different ways. Um, so those ways, in terms of perspective, are called survival. Again, we're moving from 1 till 6.
Mm-hmm.
Survival, possibility, power, wanting, probability, and personal. And some charts in human design, just if you're wondering where this exists, some chart programs show this. Others you have to dig deeper, or you have to go to a human design analyst like myself
Mm-hmm.
and sort of figure that out. But those are the 6.
Mm-hmm. So let's dive in and what do they mean? What is survival?
Um, yes, and before we begin that, when we talked about the first 2 variables, which arise from the design side, which is our body,
Mm-hmm.
those were fixed. They don't change.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But on the side of consciousness, on the personality side, which is about consciousness, awareness, um, consciousness of consciousness operates as a binary, as a duality.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about one of these perspectives, we are at the same time talking about a distraction. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
say more about that in the future, but they're paired up in a way. There's the
Mm-hmm.
primary perspective, and then there is the distraction that sort of operates as a bit of a seesaw along with our perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of like pulling us away from how we're meant to operate.
Kind of. More
Yeah.
on that in a bit. But
Yeah.
if we start with 5, which is survival, this gets distracted by 4, which is wanting. But survival are the kind of people that are meant to look at the world from the point of view of survival. They
Mm-hmm.
look at it from the point of view of fear. They look at the point of view of, um, what they see, the foundation. They see what people are afraid of. They recognize and are conditioned, or it's natural for them to look at the world from a survival based perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Trust enters into this at some point too, because
Mm-hmm.
do you trust your vehicle to be carrying you through the world safely? But
Exactly.
that's the lens through which they see things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they can't, I mean, you can see how in parts of the world, say third world countries, this could be very, very useful.
Mm-hmm.
In the Western world, this can often show up as somebody who's deeply materialistic, and very focused on money making and financial security and all of
Mm-hmm.
that, the accumulation of money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as we go, I'm going to have some examples of how the distraction works. Some of them we have to kind of work out on our own. The
Mm-hmm.
second color is possibility. And these people are quite fun to be around because generally speaking, they have a wonderful spirit that's always seeing the possibilities in people and situations and opportunities. And it's just natural, normal, and right for them to see the world in those terms.
Oh, thank you, Hartwell.
You're welcome. It's interesting because a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the people that I'm around most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
there's a larger percentage of people who have possibility perspective than any other, which is interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now the distraction is, when you're not thinking about the possibilities, your mind will default to, well, is that actually probable or not? Is that actually going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, Kris? Because this is
Yeah, like
yours.
I thought about that when I saw that, like when I was reading it, and I'm thinking, oh, well, that's why. Like, I mean, even when you're dealing with people, for example, I can always see the potentiality, but whether they're going to live up to that potentiality is something else. And I think that I've learned to step back and not be quite so um, naive, but at the same time, that other side kicks in and go, well, are they really going to do that? Like, you know, um,
Hmm.
but same thing with, dealing with business. Like it's constant. Okay, I can see all the possibilities, but what are the chances of that happening? Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a constant thing. And I think that my channel of doubt also comes in there because it's like, okay, like I can start to see how these things would work together. Yeah.
Yes, or reinforce certain kind of themes. Now, I
Yeah.
want to say a little bit more about that later, but thank you for offering your experience.
Hmm.
Now, the third color is called power. And, this one is quite, and it gets distracted by six, which is personal. But this is about all about who is up and who is down, who is winning in life and who is losing. It's like, oh, did you hear that so and so got divorced or so and so went bankrupt? These are the kind of people that are always looking, comparing themselves to others and seeing what's going on in the material world and being competitive. They're always measuring.
Hmm.
Now, keep in mind, there is no way. You might have your preferences when you hear about these, but from the
Hmm.
human design perspective, these are all neutral. They're all necessary and they all happen. None of them is better than another.
Well, I had a question because as we're going through these, you talk about them being first color, second color, third color. What does the color mean?
Sorry, I missed that, Kris. We had a bit of you cut
Oh,
out for a second.
the color. So
Yeah.
you refer to them as colors, first color, second color, third color. Why are
Yeah.
they referred to as colors?
Well, because beneath the line, you have the color and the tone. I could have been speaking about color all along because we already have been. It's just
Mhm.
here, for whatever reason, I've made it explicit.
Well, it's funny because that now I'm going deeper. So it's like, so color and tone, and then that emits frequency. So then all of these combine to make a certain frequency that we're meant to emit and be in the world.
Perhaps,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Like,
I mean, yeah, I mean, we're all designed in a certain way.
hmm.
So, with that third color, which is power, trans distraction, and to personal, these are the third line, the third color is always very attuned to the material world. So, here we have the people that are always looking to compare, who are
Mm.
always seeing how those dynamics work in the world. Now, the fourth color, which is wanting, D gets distracted by one, which is the survival. These people see what's missing. So rather than about survival, they're always thinking, what's missing here? What is needed?
Mm.
Um, these people have to be careful that if what they can get caught up in dealing with the needs and wants of the world all the time.
Hmm.
Um, but the what is needed is also another way to put that is what is being called for, what
Hmm.
is needed in the world, what do I need, but also what does the world and the people around me need.
Hmm.
So it's a very deeply social and connective perspective. The fifth color is probability, and we saw this already because they occur in pairs and
Hmm.
they're always paired up with the same one. So five is paired with possibility as its distraction.
Hmm.
These are the people say, "Oh, I'm sure." It's like it's a real high probability that I'm going to win the jackpot on the next round. Or,
Hmm.
I'm wondering if these are the people who tend to gamble a lot.
Mm-hmm.
but they like to play the odds. If they think the odds are in their favor, then they're probably, it's like that line from the Hunger Games trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
may the odds be ever in your favor,
Well, I
so
I can shed some light on that. So, like,
yeah,
it's like if you have the possibility. So, when you're gambling, there's always a possibility that you're going to win. So,
yes,
why not take a chance? So, you can see how the two would interact with each other, right? It's like, what have I
hmm,
got to lose? There's a chance that I'll win. But if I don't ever take that chance, if I don't ever buy that ticket or I don't ever play the game, I don't have a possibility to win, right?
right,
So I
yeah,
think that that's where that comes from. Like,
yeah, yeah, that makes
I love
perfect
playing poker,
sense.
right? So
Yeah.
it's like, well, I could get a good hand. You never know. And I can beat somebody who's a professional just by getting a good hand, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the last one is called personal,
Mm-hmm.
which of course gets distracted by power. This was Roz, and I hate to say it, but it's true. Personal is very narcissistic. These are
Mm-hmm.
the people that are uh, see everything through their own lens and in context to themselves. And it can potentially be deeply isolating. It's like these people live in a world and they can have no idea what's going on around them. It's like Marie Antoinette and her favorite famous saying, "Let them eat cake,"
Mm-hmm.
because she was part of the nobility. It's like, masses are starving, and you say, "Well, let them eat cake." Well, they don't have cake.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even have rice. They don't even have potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
So people with a personal perspective can have very little idea of what's going on. They can be very naive. Everything is framed through their own process.
Mm-hmm.
And I must admit, this is mine, and it's like making sense to me. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
it's it's kind of like sometimes I feel like completely isolated and cut off from the rest of the world. Like I'm in
Mm-hmm.
my own thing,
Yeah. Like you've
and
expressed that. So,
yeah, and I just lose track of things.
mm-hmm.
Now this, but the distraction is power.
Mm-hmm.
And so then sometimes I get distracted by comparing myself to other people. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not where I should be in life, or this person
Mm-hmm.
is doing better than I am, or
Right.
um but here's actually where this illustrates how important the different things are to each other. We're not meant to be completely free from distraction.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a seesaw. Whatever your perspective is, you're meant to be in that frame of looking at things more often than not. But
Mm-hmm.
in order to keep you from becoming imbalanced, you need the distraction.
Mm-hmm.
So the person, such as myself, who is always seeing things from their own perspective and through their own process, if I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have the distraction of power, I would be completely cut off from the world. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a necessary balance that can enter in.
Mm-hmm.
However, if I'm always seeing the world through a power dynamic and comparing myself to everyone, then I've lost my own unique frame of reference and it would
Yeah.
be deeply dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're in alignment by living in your right environment, then you're going to be nourished in the correct way and your perspective and your distraction are going to be reasonably balanced. That is, it's going to work as it's meant to.
Mm-hmm.
But
It
if you're in the wrong environment in your life, that's going to be skewed. You're not going to be seeing the world through your own unique lens.
Mhm. Yeah, but it makes sense that it would ebb and flow like that. And then it's all about, I think about the word discernment again, like our mentor brings up. So it's like, okay, well, is that really for me or not for me? And what lens am I seeing it through right now? So there is a
Yes.
whole process to actually taking in that information and then what do you do with it? So which lens you take, which perspective is important, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, as Ra says, the moment you're not seeing the world as you're designed to see it is the moment you realize that you're off track. So
Mm,
if I start to see the world too, if I start to get in the trap of seeing, comparing myself too much to the rest of the world, and getting caught up in, am I winning? Am I losing? Am I better than or worse than somebody else?
hmm
If that's what's happening, then I can tell, okay, I'm off track now.
hmm
Um, So it can be a good way of checking in with yourself and asking, okay, am I balanced right now? Because
hmm
you will notice, even, for those of you watching, um, if you know your perspective and distraction, you will watch your mind doing it all the time. And it can
hmm
be quite hilarious,
hmm
you
Well,
know?
like it all makes sense to me. Like, like I guessed who I was just by
Yeah.
looking at it. Like I could feel it, right? Um,
Yes.
and because I've always been that person that everybody's like, "Oh my God, why are you so positive? And why are you looking at all of that?" And I'm always looking at ways to make things work versus, well,
Hmm.
I can't do it, right? It's like there has to be another way, or how do I fix this? Or
Yeah.
so it it rings true. But again, I like playing the game of guessing who people are because I'm a child. So I
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
it
It is
really
fun.
fun. And like knowing, and I have to say, knowing who you are now, that makes sense to me as well. Like
Hmm.
I would have said that was you as well. Because lots of times we have conversations and we're like, "Oh, Hartwell, don't you get it? Like people aren't nice sometimes, Hartwell." Like
Yes. Yes.
there's that naivety to you and that sweetness, right? And so, like knowing that's part of your design, not, you know what I mean? Not you just not knowing. It's part of your design to be that way, right? And there's probably another reason why it's that way, how it hooks up to gates and channels and everything else in the design, right?
Well,
So,
that's another interesting layer. I'm glad you
mhm,
sort of gave me a segue for that. Because remember, here we're talking about the personality nodes.
mhm,
And and those nodes are in gates. And the nodes are about your trajectory in the world. So but we're not actually adding in any of the meaning of your specific nodes or my specific nodes. Because, for instance, in my case, I'm meant to see the world in a personal way because I have the personal perspective, but
mhm,
through the energy of gate 41. Gate
mhm,
41 is the gate of fantasy. It's what launches us into an excitement around what's possible in the world in terms of dreams. This,
mhm,
again, possibility not to be confused with the perspective of possibility.
mhm,
And then leader 31, which is the gate of influence. So
mhm.
I'm meant to look at the world, through the perspective of a personal perspective on what it means to be influential in the world.
Well,
So there
it's
is that layer.
interesting but it's interesting. So now I tie that to your actual study of human design and astrology because you pick those up. So I'm studying myself. I want to learn about myself. And then it's through learning about yourself and through that lens that you are influential with the people who come to see you, right? So,
Indeed.
yeah, so it totally makes sense, right? The design and how it's functioning and how it's working. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that people really have to start diving into these variables, like not just looking at, the gates and channels, because it gives you, it's almost like a piece of the missing puzzle. Like it's like a piece that's
Hmm.
missing. And then all of a sudden something clicks when you pick up this little nugget, right, of information. Like, yeah, I know that's the way it is for me. So,
Yeah. And then
mhm,
you can relax more deeply into a trust of your own design, is what I would
mhm,
hope for myself and for others. It's
mhm,
like if I try and see the world through the eyes of possibility, that would be not self for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I can admire and appreciate the people in my life who have possibility perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not my perspective.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
So,
is there anything you want to say to wrap things up today?
well, I want to share this one last quote. I found it
Mm-hmm.
powerful from Ra. He says, "Mind isn't for turning off. Mind isn't for turning off." A lot of us talk about that. I just want to turn off my mind. So he say, mind isn't for turning off. It's for aligning. It's for
Mm-hmm.
correcting it. We have great minds. They're beautiful things, but the mind is not there to be your enemy for life. It isn't. It's here to serve. It's here to express you. It is our medium for expression.
Mm-hmm.
So this helps us rehabilitate the role of mind in our life. But if mind is simply serving the not self by generating fears, then it's not ever going to feel good.
Yeah.
So that's the part of us. That's the part of us we want to unplug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I just again want to encourage everybody. Like Hartwell has programs and stuff which can dive into this additional information. So if it's something that interests you, so of course, like come in, book an appointment, and just dive deeper with us. And the more you dive in, the more you understand yourself, and the more you can become in alignment with who you truly meant to be. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So next week, do we know what
Next
we're
week,
doing?
we do the final perspective, which is called motivation.
Ah, yes. And then we'll be able to tie them all together. Perfect. Right on. Well, with that, we'll say goodbye. God bless. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to our channel so that you can keep up to date with all of these little tidbits that we're putting out there. And for sure, come in and visit us here. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. God bless.